Hello, I'm filmmaker Arthur Musah, and welcome to another episode of Yelle Conversations Worth Bringing Home. In 2021, after a wave of attacks and escalating hostility towards LGBTQ plus Ghanaians, lawmakers introduced a terrible hate bill in an attempt to criminalize queer people and their allies in Ghana. The bill was called the Promotion of Proper Human Sexual Rights and Ghanaian Family Values Bill, a marketing ploy to trick Ghanaians into supporting a bill that would harm their fellow country folks, sow division, and undermine freedom and justice in the country. While many Ghanaians pushed back, activists on the ground, legal advocates, health experts, and diaspora community who love Ghana enough to tell the truth about what this bill would do to our people in future. That is how I met two Ghanaian women I respect deeply, Abena Hutchful and Akua Gyamerah. Abena is a human rights lawyer in New York, working with immigrant children, including queer youth who fled persecution. Akua is a public health researcher and professor whose work examines LGBTQ plus health in Africa in the context of criminalization and structural violence. The original bill passed Parliament in February 2024, but was not signed into law by then President Akufo-Addo, and then it lapsed. Now it is back again in Ghana's Parliament as the Human Sexual Rights and Family Values Bill of 2025. Again, a branding ploy to make it sound positive when its effects would be deeply harmful. With Ghana's independence coming up on March 6, I wanted to zoom out and ask a bigger Black liberation question. What does freedom mean if it does not include the most targeted amongst us? And if this bill is not the answer, what could a truly humane, Ghana-loving, future-facing alternative look like? And so I couldn't think of two better people to have this conversation with than Abena and Akua. So welcome, Abena. Welcome, Akua. Thank you for saying yes to this chat. So to get things going, I'd love for both of you to maybe tell us a little bit about what you do. I know I gave a brief introduction, but in your own words and maybe in some detail, tell us a little bit about what you do and then where your journey into activism began.
Well, thank you for inviting us, Arthur. Really excited to be uh, in this conversation with you both. I am an attorney, as you said, with the Young Center for Immigrant Children's Rights, and I focus my advocacy on detained immigrant children, systems change to basically end family separation and to expand protections for children in the U.S. immigration system. And I also, in my spare time, do represent some clients who are LGBTQ identified and fleeing persecution from their respective countries. And I came into this work, it's kind of, it to me makes sense in my life that I dedicate, my education to the work that I do because for me, being someone who grew up in Ghana and between Ghana and the US, and with was raised primarily by a single immigrant, mother, and who saw, some of the just challenges of migration, particularly as a Black migrant, presented. It shaped my life, and so it made sense that I would go into immigrant rights work. But I also remember being interested in activism, particularly the work of decolonization and the work of freedom, African freedom fighters, particularly from an early age because of the Ghana national anthem. I didn't understand or I couldn't hear the line "Help us to resist oppressors' rule." And so I remember asking my dad, like, what is it? Because I would just say, "Help us to resist oppressors' rule." Like I would just rush it, and and my dad would be like, No, help us to resist oppressors' rule. And they explained, what that meant and the history of Ghana's independence movement, right? And like J.B. Dankwa and Nkrumah. So that was always something I valued as important, and something that, is like a whatever, like a national like call, as something we should be dedicated to. So I was always like in school involved in protests, activism, on different levels, particularly if in the interest of African liberation. Um, and
That's
yeah,
wonderful. I
that's,
mean, it started from very, very early years, right?
or yeah, as an interest, very early years, influenced by, I think, my family. Um,
And
yeah.
Akua.
Yes, it's kind of some overlapping themes in terms of my journey as Abena's. But yeah, I mean, I was an activist. I've been an activist for a while, around different social justice issues since 2005 when I was in college, and learning a lot more about the world beyond my immediate experiences and things I had learned in my high school classroom. But as I got to college as a working class immigrant in the United States, on an elite campus, I came and was confronted by racism, and that radicalized me into activism. And then over the years, I met other activists who introduced me to um, other line of work, organizing histories around LGBTQ liberation, Black liberation, immigrant rights, et cetera, anti-imperialism. And so it's through those experiences that I became just committed to fighting for, freedom wherever I was. So that is something I've been committed to. And, soon after I graduated college, there was already a movement in the United States. There was a developing movement around LGBT rights in the United States because of Prop 8, the repeal of Prop 8 in California, which was a bill that allowed for um,
Right.
same-sex union in California, and was, in 2008, and the 2008 election was repealed. And so a lot of organizing happening in California came to the national media and national attention, and it spread to other states and became a national movement, not just for to reinstate that bill, but also to repeal a bunch of other harmful, like Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and to allow for same-sex marriage, right, and constitutional protections for LGBTQ Americans. So I was helping with that organizing in New York, and learned from those histories and experience more about that struggle. And, as a queer person as well, it was both personal and political. And then I went back to Ghana, actually, for the first time in 14 years, in 2010. And at that time, I was just about to start my doctorate, and was going to focus my doctorate on trans health needs in the United States, looking at health policy for trans populations in the United States, right? And so, that was my plan. And then I came back to Ghana, and so many things were new and so many things remained the same. But one of the things that was new to me, and eye-opening, was hearing on the radio anti-LGBT, very homophobic rhetoric by different media personalities. And then, for whatever reason, I kind of compartmentalized my activism in the United States around LGBT rights and my identity. I wasn't really, but that brought my attention to the question of what it is like for LGBTQ Ghanaians to live every day and survive every day in Ghana, given this kind of violent rhetoric that, even as terrible as things were in the United States, was not something you would commonly hear on the media, right? It doesn't mean it didn't exist, but it wasn't that so explicit and in your face. So I became interested and I shifted my focus of my doctorate on that very question, right? What's life like? And so that's how I became more directly involved in that question for Ghanaians, LGBT rights, social cultural beliefs about it, what day-to-day life is like, what health access is like. For me, as a public health researcher, that was always kind of one of the main outcomes I was interested in. What are the laws? What are the other structural factors that are shaping people's lives? And how does that impact people's health outcomes? So, sorry, that was a bit long, but that's how I became involved. And through that process, I got to meet activists and community organizers who were doing work around, LGBT rights and health in Ghana at the time. At that time, there was really one organization, one main organization that was doing the work. And so 2010 is when I became interested. 2011 is when I actively started kind of reaching out and building relationships with activists. So, yeah.
That's fascinating. I'm actually curious about, my intuition is that the work that both of you do could use a lot more resources and a lot more people working in those fields. Is that true? What's the day-to-day like? Do you feel um, overwhelmed, kind of rewarded by the work that you do? Are there a lot of successes that drive, or do you just kind of keep pushing through?
Yeah, I was gonna let you answer first. Um, I think mine in a well, I'll answer this to the context that it's in, but like I think um, there is there are a lot of gaps in terms of access to justice, access to representation, right, in the immigration system, especially now. Further criminalized, the more criminalized it is to be an immigrant, to be a Black immigrant, and there are many ways in which it's being increasingly criminalized, and that more and more barriers are being erected, right, to for people accessing justice. So I think that for that reason, there is a need for more people, more attention, more resources, right, in this work. However, I think it's also a product of our failures to see our struggles as interconnected, right, and that there's uh, the same barriers to access to justice that a person in immigration court faces are, the same as a person in the larger carceral system, and globally too. Like here in the United States, our struggle is linked to the struggle for queer liberation in Ghana. It's just like harder to see when you're like so focused on the immediate fires or like the immediate um, threats at hand. And that took me a long time to understand and appreciate um, the ways the it's just a new phase or a new uh, type of oppression, but it's really the same the same forces behind it. So it's hard for me to answer that. Like I think we're when we talk about resources, often the conversation is about funding for the organizations that represent people whose rights are being violated, or we're talking about material resources like to support people who've been displaced or who are being persecuted. Um, but but not really thinking about like resources like the research or researchers like the data that needs to be um, shared, presented in different contexts so we can understand systemically the ways in which uh, our our fights are mirror each other or the ways in which like we can work more strategically across movements. So I feel like I'm answering this in a kind of an abstract way, but yeah, I feel like there's always room for sharing of resources or redistribution of resources to benefit or to like support disenfranchised, marginalized people, and including in the fight for queer and trans liberation in Ghana. Um, but that's not what yeah, I'm directly like steeped in or like involved in on a day to day, so it can be hard to say. But yeah, I feel like you have more direct experience, like work, or at least working in the healthcare, yeah, health justice context in Ghana, doing research in Ghana. I'm curious your thoughts about it.
Thanks. Yeah. And Arthur, the question was around some of like the areas of needs, basically resources and support that's
Yeah.
needed.
Yeah, I'm wondering what do you feel like
Mhm.
the are resources flowing into the work that needs to be done or the work that you're doing, that you and your colleagues are doing particularly in these spaces that of like queer supporting work?
It's a big question. It's a very timely question because as you probably know, there's been a lot of funding cut in this area of work, right? Um, a lot of the funding that goes into LGBT rights and specifically health, health outcomes related to that have been cut. They come from the global north, right? Western countries that have disproportionate amount of global resources. And then it trickles down to global south countries. And unfortunately, the way the funding is distributed and how the work is done, and I think this, I don't blame any of us in the global south. I think ultimately a structural issue at the top. But the way funding works is that it's not designed to sustain the programs and the resources that people are using to identify harms, meet needs, et cetera, right? So oftentimes programs end when funding ends, right? And it just means like with these funding cuts, programs disappear. And already lots of studies have shown that it's estimated up to 1 million people will die in the coming years due to these funding cuts across the globe, disproportionately, if not almost all, in the global south. So we are in crisis, experiencing multiple crises
Yeah.
in terms of this work, LGBT rights, LGBT health, the intersection of those two, not just in the global south, in the global north as well, specifically in the United States, where, the CDC, for example, removed its HIV division, right, which HIV disproportionately impacts trans women, gay men, bisexual men, and other men who have sex with men. And Black women, disproportionately, these are the populations that are impacted. And when you remove the agencies that are there to actually address these needs, this is just one one example of eugenics, right? Where the most marginalized among us are being literally eliminated. They're being killed by policies and policy decisions and funding decisions. This is happening in the US and trickling down into the global south, right? These policy changes that are happening, it's not just happening in the global south, it is happening in the US as well. So long story short, we don't have as much money. Personally, I lost my grant. And I'll tell you more about that research I've been doing for the last 4 years. Almost 4 years, I've been doing research looking at the impact of intersecting social stressors like the anti-LGBT legislation, gender-based violence, sexuality-based violence, stigma, discrimination, and so forth, how those are impacting the mental health and HIV treatment outcomes of queer men and trans women living with HIV.
In Ghana.
In Ghana specifically, sorry. And so that funding was cut last year as I was about to launch a survey, which was the main part of the study to better understand the relationship between all these different factors I just described. It was cut, right? And so I had to scramble and figure out how to, maintain some money to help pay staff and then, the time and transportation of volunteer participants to complete the survey, right? Thankfully, with a successful lawsuit, some of these grants have been reinstated. My grant was one of, over 1,000 grants that were terminated. I think estimates are upward 2,000. But they were sued. The administration that made that decision, that shall not be named, were sued, and they lost that lawsuit in June. So thankfully, eventually by September, I got my funding back and was able to,
Okay.
But there's a crisis. There's not enough. There's not enough funding to meet the needs, and the needs are significant because of the harms caused by these types of structurally violent policies that ultimately kill people.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing, and I exactly like highlighting your research as a clear example. And as this is a great question, Arthur, and I looked up because there was this article it's called the Ghanaian State Built that Nana Ama Adjumani Asante wrote, that looks at some of the funding, just like the funding by right-wing Christian groups to African countries to influence laws and policies, right? Anti-LGBTQ laws and policies, right? And just like as an example, because I was thinking also how, when Trump, the Doge era of cutting funding to USAID and just basically dismantling USAID, that shuttered a lot of critical programs, like even the research that Akua is doing. And it was 156 million of suspended aid, right, through USAID to Ghana for projects, including LGBTQ, projects on health and specifically related to health justice. But compare that to $280 million that right-wing groups have been spending, more than $50 million of which has gone to politicians and religious leaders to influence laws and programs, to promote bills like this. And when you think about the fact that this is going directly into the pockets of of politicians, it's not even money that is going necessarily through the Ghana government. This is going to church groups like Christian church, what's it called, Christian Council of Ghana, and directly into the hands of politicians. And the other one, Open Democracy, also found that a coalition of 28 U.S. organizations has spent $280 million around, in Africa to influence laws and policies. So just like there's more being spent on anti-LGBTQ efforts than there was, even going towards protection and research, and we've lost, right? And I think that gives a sense, at least on the continent, like the disparity in resources.
Yeah. And I just want to add one thing I
Yeah.
forgot to say. Sorry, Arthur.
That's okay.
But
Give us all the info. These are
also drop the link. Thank you. Drop the links. Thank you very much. And maybe we can also share some of this, Arthur, on the podcast too, in terms of resources people can.
Yes, when I post it on YouTube, we can include some links and resources as well. So absolutely share this with me. Thank you.
Yes, but one thing I wanted to also add is that there's a massive disparity in funding for queer women, right? Lesbian, bisexual women, non-binary, assigned female at birth, gender diverse individuals on the continent and in Ghana, right? A lot of the funding goes to HIV, which ultimately goes to male-led organizations because HIV disproportionately affects queer men. Before queer women, very little funding exists. And it means many of the queer women and trans male organizations struggle to get funding to even find out what the disparities are in order to then find more some more funding to actually do programming that would address those needs. So just want to point that out because this gap is reflective of the sexism also in this kind of health funding, the political economy where funding disproportionately goes to male-led organizations. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention that particular disparity.
I appreciate you pointing that out. I think that's important facts to put into people's awareness. The thing I was going to follow up before we move on to the Ghana bill specifically is, I can see maybe some of the proponents of this bill kind of hearing this or using the soundbite of HIV disproportionately affects men, right? Or queer men and running with that. I mean, they've been doing that to sow fear. So help us kind of put that into a broader context, into a deeper understanding of why that's the case. It's not just that gay men are, like the spreaders of HIV, right? Help us kind of push back against that.
Yeah, I mean, that data point, the disproportionate impact is both a historical consequence, it's a consequence of historical policies, and also of these structural factors that I named earlier, right? Including anti-LGBT legislation, right? Under which I would nest the unnatural carnal knowledge law, which currently is the law that is referred to as a de facto criminalization of homosexuality in Ghana. Even though if you read the details, it doesn't specifically talk about, homosexuality. It's very vague language about unnatural, sex that at some point mentions male same-sex intimacy. But anyway, it's considered that way. It's considered an anti-homosexuality law. And these kinds of structural determinants is what drives the disparities, right? Historically, I'll talk about the historical component. For most of the epidemic in Ghana, male same-sex transmission was not even acknowledged, let alone included in policies and programs. What that ultimately meant is that the needs of that community went unmet, right? And that was not just, because Ghana didn't include it, it's because of the downstream effects of HIV policies globally that described the African epidemic as heterosexual in comparison to the Western epidemic as quote unquote homosexual. And that then shaped funding flow funding priorities and programs for the global South countries that were experiencing these epidemics. Men who have sex with men, which is the public health term that's used to describe male same-sex transmission, were not included. And that drove what we now see as a huge disparity within the community, right? But if you actually look at let's use Ghana as an example, Ghana's epidemic is generalized, right? It's a generalized epidemic, which means the general population makes up the largest proportion, quote unquote, general population makes up the largest proportion of people living with HIV. The largest proportion is not gay men, bisexual men, or other men who have sex with men. It's
Right.
just that within that small population, there's a higher prevalence. And that
Because
high
there's no information, no
exactly.
resources, right? And all
Yeah.
that.
Lack of
There's
lack of
a
targeted
climate
programs,
of fear, right? Even if
climate
you
of fear,
knew
stigma.
what you
Mhm.
needed to protect yourself or get treatment, so you're undetectable and all that stuff,
Yeah.
accessing that is in this cloud of fear, right?
And people didn't know that they can get HIV because the messaging around HIV for the first couple of decades is for women, and that
Mhm.
women have to wear condoms because HIV spreads through penile vaginal intercourse, right? So if you talk to many gay Ghanaian men, especially from that generation, they're like, we didn't know, right? Even now, people don't know because when you look at the education in schools, they're still talking about it in that way. And while the majority of people who are getting HIV in Ghana are getting it through heterosexual transmission, right? Let's not forget that. The people who are pushing this bill will not focus on that. They want to focus on the prevalence within a smaller marginalized group, right? Gay men. While that is true, it is still a reality that HIV can be transmitted between men. And when we don't educate people about that, they won't know, right? So part of it was, a lack of education around this issue. The other part was, right, lack of funding and targeted programming, and then the stigma and discrimination and literal violence that people experience at the site of healthcare that prevent people from going back or feeling comfortable to seek care or open up about their sexuality or whatever else, right? Which is still ongoing, right? Just to give an example, just a month ago, a nurse who's considered very friendly within the community, actually within, when I say community, community of, gay men, bisexual men, that, she works with in, clinical, HIV prevention, et cetera. Went on national TV to talk about Ghana's most recent HIV surveillance data. That's what the focus was. It was just generally Ghana's HIV surveillance data. And she used her platform to say a number of things, but well, to me, the most harmful of some of the things that she said was pushing stereotypes about gay men on national TV. And she started talking about HIV among gay men and how some men even wear Pampers because of anal intercourse, which is not a thing. But she sat there with her credentials, right, as a nurse, and shared this misinformation, which then reinforced these homophobic ideas about, uh, you know, gay people in Ghana, right, as folks who are disease ridden and experiencing all kinds of like physiological harm from the kind of
I
sex
came up
they.
on the my Persec old boys WhatsApp chat.
Right. So harmful, completely undoes the years of, you know, stigma training, right? Anti-stigma training healthcare workers have received uh, to actually create a friendlier environment for gay men to come in. There has been efforts around that.
Hmm.
But just with that small clip, right, on national TV, she has undone that work, right? Because tens of thousands of people have now received this information as fact from an expert,
Mhm.
used it to reinforce or gain new stereotypes about gay people. So just want to give that example regarding some of these stigmas that then drive people to, stay home or, stop adhering to their medication or actually take their life by suicide. These are things that are happening, and we have to speak out about it. It's harmful.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. A lot of work to be done. I'm basically almost speechless at this point. Um, but we keep pushing on. We keep pushing on in our little fields, trusting that the little contributions that we make will eventually add up to big change in the country that we love and in the world that we share with everybody else. So maybe we go back and kind of catch up everybody on what exactly happened with this bill. It was proposed in 2021. It went away. Maybe people thought it was dead, and now it's back in Parliament. Could you maybe speak to what has happened between that 2021 moment to this moment that we find ourselves kind of facing the possibility of an anti-LGBT bill, basically a hate bill that would criminalize queer people and allies?
Yeah. So I think the first misconception that folks might have is that like that the bill went away,
Mm.
because it never did. I think there was just less attention on it. Uh, so after it was introduced in 2021, we all saw outcry from different corners of the world, but led by Ghanaian queer and trans Ghanaians who were basically sounding the alarms that like this bill is dangerous. Don't Let's not take this lightly. And there was a sustained effort to push it through Parliament. By the eight MPs who promoted it. There was a lot of disinformation around that bill. They have, like we said, a lot of resource from U.S. Primarily U.S. right-wing groups, a lot of propaganda, to push this as a family values bill, and that's been sustained throughout. Sam George, who was the most vocal um, of the bill sponsors, was everywhere. You could not, no matter which outlet, social media, mainstream news, this dude was everywhere promoting this bill. We saw the immediate effects even before the bill was passed, before it passed Parliament. The immediate effect already on people in Ghana. There were over 70 human rights violations in just like the first, at least Human Rights Watch reports over 70 in just the first 9 months of since its introduction. And we know that there were more, right? Because we know that because of the stigma, because of the shame, people who are victimized, who are targeted in their communities, are not likely to report that violence. Also, we know that the police is complicit in anti-LGBTQ violence, and so again, this is like what of the reported cases. And there were also there was efforts to educate people around at the same time, right? People continue to do the work of educating around our sexual rights, around creating, safe spaces for queer and trans Ghanaians to access resources, access information, to just find community. But there was sustained efforts to crack down on that too. Again, even before the bill has passed, its provisions are being enforced as if it's law, right? So I'm referencing the whole 2021 here, but even of course, this is after the bill introduced. There was there were protests that I know there and I'm sorry I don't have the exact details here, but there were protests where people were taken as well during that. I know that
In
there
Ghana.
were in Ghana, right? Like, and sorry, folks, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember there were other arrests after that. But in any event, there were constitutional challenges to the bill, and the unfortunately, we have a Supreme Court that is also very much controlled by the church, or just very differential and ideologically very further right wing, and influenced by religious groups. And so the challenges were unsuccessful on procedural grounds, that because these members' bills had not actually passed Parliament yet, that they wasn't ripe for a challenge. And then after that, actually in 2024, so much later, 3 years after it'd been introduced, almost 3 years after it'd been introduced, did it pass Parliament unanimously. And there's a lot behind like why that was. But I think the important thing was that there was kind of a lot of political pressure on Akufo-Addo, the president at the time, to sign this into law. And I don't know whether I don't think it's like a sign of success that he didn't ultimately. I think he was like passing the buck ultimately, waiting for another because it was an election year. That's just my opinion. I don't
There
know,
was no
but
true leadership from the politicians at the
no,
presidential level, from what I,
no,
yeah.
yeah. And he also, right, was very much bought by the church. He had how many millions did he spend on that cathedral that was never actually built, but collected like tens of millions for this cathedral that would
The
never
National
come to
Cathedral.
pass. Yes. And so, was beholden to, I think that was part of the reason behind his inaction. But anyway, the bill never went anywhere, is my point, is that it was just, it was still actually this was stronger than ever, passed Parliament unanimously, and pending presidential signature. And then of course, that there's a time limit. So like it lapsed as the new administration came into power. Um, and now it's been resurrected. So as when Parliament reopened this session, we have a new president, and um, who has been signaling that he would sign it. He told Christian Council of Ghana that he would sign it, and yet I think maybe there wasn't enough support to bring it up again in Parliament. I don't know why it still hasn't been, but it was reintroduced, even though it didn't need to be. It was already and it had already passed, right? Already being brought up for a vote and passed. It was reintroduced again. Has gone through its first reading. I guess it has to go through the whole process again for him to sign, and been referred to committee. And we have no reason to think that it won't pass again this time, right? Like it's just a matter of it going through the process, and then landing on President Mahama's desk. And so there's a lot of urgency to continue to bring back that same like uproar, like it's like the outcry from 2021. We need it magnified, to put more pressure on the executive to not sign this when it reaches their desks. To put more pressure also, like we can still put pressure on parliamentarians to not sign. I don't know. What do you think, Ikea, having been there more recently, the likelihood of that?
I guess maybe Akua or both of you, maybe we don't go too much into the details of the
Okay.
contents of the bill, but like high level, what is this bill proposing to do? Just so people have who may be tuning in and hearing about this topic for the first time, on the high level, what are they proposing for this bill to accomplish?
You
Can you
came
hear
off
me?
mute. Did you want to
Oh,
keep
am I
going?
on mute? Okay, great.
I can hear you. We can hear you.
Great. Yeah, no, I mean, the bill is still, I mean, it's what it was when it was introduced, right? In 2021, they've made some edits, but it's horrendous. It is aiming to criminalize LGBTQ plus what, they have a long list of identities. Somebody's Ghanaian uncle in parliament found. How did they even know about pansexuals? Please tell me, where did you learn about these terms? Some of the terms I'm even wondering, like, do I know this? What do I know what it means? I mean, it's very clear that there is foreign hands in the writing of these bills, just based on like some of the identities that Ghanaians don't even necessarily claim within the community, being listed and being criminalized, right? But that aside, it would criminalize these identities. It would criminalize knowing someone with those identities, right? Or being allied to those with that identity. It would criminalize, quote unquote, promoting, whatever that means, right? I mean, they have their definitions, but you can see how that would be exploited. Even the current, unnatural carnal knowledge bill is considered an anti-LGBT. So imagine what these like vague and open to interpretation kind of terms in that bill would lead to, right? It would criminalize or disband organizations that service LGBTQ plus community members or individuals, or just the very idea of it. Um, they would disband those organizations. It is clearly unconstitutional. I mean, it's like very unconstitutional, and also just harmful. I mean, some of the punishments are, prison time and or, fines that the average Ghanaian cannot afford, let alone marginalized community members who are barely making anything. If you look at income among LGBTQ Ghanaians, because of, systemic discrimination, people are more marginalized and get less work opportunities, and that means lower income. So it is very violent. When we talk about use the term structural violence, this is one great example of what structural violence is, right?
This is it.
This is it.
Documented.
Policies that are aimed to harm, right? Uh, a particular small group of people, subpopulation of a country, in this case, LGBTQ people. It is terrible. It would harm, in the case of the work that I do, right? We cannot collect certain data on LGBT health, because it might be considered promoting homosexuality. We cannot do certain programming and outreach to prevent, because it would be considered promoting. If you give people condoms, they can tell you're encouraging them to have sex with other men, right? Or, PrEP, right? Which helps prevent HIV transmission. So it is harmful.
And if I
Just
could,
and among one of the worst proposed in Africa, right? It's not, and in the world. Like, it's not just like, oh, this thing is bad in Ghana. It is actually objectively some of the worst attacks on LGBTQ people globally.
Mhm.
Thank you. Abena, did you want to say something?
Yeah, and I was just adding, to what you were saying, about the current state, right, of access information, the disinformation that is happening now. That is not criminalized, right? Like spewing erroneous information, like um, stigmatizing people, like that's not criminalized. But correcting that, countering with actual data research and credible information would be criminalized, right? Because it could be seen as promoting LGBTQ identity. Also, the other piece it would just do is displace people. It would criminalize harboring LGBTQ people or who are suspected. This is even before you even establish someone's identity, right? It will place pressure, even without active enforcement. Knowing that something is illegal gives you that weaponry, right, to intimidate, to harass people. So landlords can extort their tenants. Family members, abusers can force the victims into silence, right? Can pressure them and threaten to expose them because some of the sentencing is harsher than the sentencing than the actual crime of for instance how many people do we know that have been criminalized or have been prosecuted for child marriage for rape for statutory rape the sentencing for allies or the proposed sentence for quote unquote promoting LGBTQ identity is harsher than for sexual violence against children, for sexual violence that against really anyone. So I think it's like Akua said, it's the worst bill of its kind. It is like so dangerous. The risk of people who are in the LGBTQ community, but also people who aren't, but suspected of being right gay or someone just has a vendetta can threaten to report you, can spread a rumor and enact and incite some mob violence against you even before you've involved the police, even before you've involved the law enforcement. It's so dangerous. And that's why even before it passed, once it was introduced, we saw rates of reported violence against LGBTQ people go up because just the insinuation, it emboldens people to enact harm against others for.
Yeah. And some of that harm is already happening. And what's
Yeah.
cool about this bill, even is that the existence of the bill is it's going to worsen it, right? And so so I mentioned the study that was terminated, my study that was terminated and then reinstated. So in that study, part of it is understanding people's experiences under like legislation like this, right? Whether proposed or ratified into law. And in my interviews with participants, folks shared with me that they're already experiencing the impact in terms of housing and jobs, right? People are getting fired by their bosses because of suspicion of being gay, and losing their housing because, you have too many male friends coming over, right? So the impact is already being felt. Now imagine it as a law and how many more times worse it will get. And not just for those who, share the identity, but those who fit the stereotype, right, of what people within the identity looks like, right? So yeah, it's for many reasons a bill that is causing and will cause immense harm.
And if I could add one more thing
Yeah.
about just the time, right? So situate it in like the harm in the context of just like where we're at now globally with shrinking access to asylum globally and like looking at just the US as an example, but this is happening not just in the US, but looking at the US as an example, access to asylum is harder and harder than it's harder than ever before. But for LGBTQI people, especially, the one of the elements you have to prove, or the standard of proof is even higher. So one of the judges look for, one of the things judges look for is membership in a group, in a particular social group. LGBTQI identity is considered a particular social group, but How would people have known that you were gay? Were you part of an organization? Were you, openly gay? No. Well, then your fear of persecution is not credible, right? But can you be openly gay in Ghana when even even just the promise of this bill without even passing is enough to,
Yeah.
is enough to put a target on your head? Like could you actively be part of any kind of advocacy group or organization openly, publicly, if that would land you potentially 10 years, or 7, 10 years in prison? Like
Mhm.
it's a coordinated attack across, it's not just in Ghana, it's across the world. The fact that even people with valid claims for asylum, or threat of torture, are being sent to third countries where their identity is also criminalized, is a sign, is it's just a further proof of the fact that this is a global systemic attack.
In some ways, it was devious of, well, that might lead into the question I was going to ask next, but maybe ties to the data point that you mentioned earlier, Abena, about how, there's a study about $280 million pumped into Africa or Ghana specifically, Africa in general, right? Um,
Yeah,
from
in
religious
general, not
group,
Ghana.
yeah, from religious groups in the US, to push for anti-LGBT laws, and in some ways it was devious to make that effort because now you're actually I'm gonna um, finish. I'm gonna let the rest of our conversation kind of make that point. But maybe simply what I was trying to say is that you make the conditions hard here, but while it was hard to sort of exert that pressure, right? There was a time in the US where we seem to have protections for trans people, for queer people, in state legislatures as well as at the federal level. And a lot of these bodies that went to Africa to sort of do the work of advancing hatred and making the conditions for queer people difficult there. And now they sort of took that power and maybe have brought it back and are able to reinforce their mission. Anyway, maybe that's a little bit beside the point. But I guess my next question was going to be, so we're focused on Ghana because, a little bit because of what brought us together, the 2021 bill in Ghana and our efforts from the diaspora, kind of like push back through protests and things like that. So we've been focused on Ghana, or at least this conversation has been focused on Ghana. But there have been a lot of these bills that have passed into law relatively recently on the African continent. There's a terrible one in Uganda. I believe I've been seeing on Twitter reports about two women being arrested recently. I believe it was in Uganda for supposedly kissing, sharing a kiss in public. The details of that, still kind of coming up, but that resulted in an arrest. And so that's Uganda. There's a lot more going on there. And Nigeria has the Same-Sex Prohibition Act, which, among other things, prohibits gay marriage, so to speak, but a lot of other things as well. Mali just recently passed some anti-LGBTQ legislature. I believe Burkina just did, Burkina Faso, Ghana's neighbor. And then this week, I also saw reports that Senegal, the prime minister of Senegal, was proposing even harsher laws. I believe they have some laws already in place. He's proposing increasing the penalties for being queer, and just living. So, what do we know about how these laws come to be, um, on the African continent, and then for Ghana specifically? what is the evidence about, you know, what are the origins of these legislative instruments, these laws that are attacking queer people that are already vulnerable? Um, I believe there's like a colonial legal inheritance of some sort, but then there's a more recent effort. What can we talk about in a way that's maybe doesn't put anybody in danger, but what do we know? Do we know anything about the origins of these?
Sorry, when I see you
I'm up to
unmute.
you. I'm like, lawyer can answer it, it's up to you. Do you want to answer?
Yeah, I mean, well, just that the origins, it's interesting. Well, I think the irony is that the origins of these bills, they're all colonial era laws. And I say ironic because one of the talking points that Ghanaian politicians love to use is that the whole idea of gender expansiveness, sexual diversity, that's all a Western uh, concept, and that, but when in reality, actually, it's the homophobia that was imported, and um, the other reason that's ironic is that these are all modeled after the same legislation. Like, so the existing anti-sodomy laws were all colonial era, and this new wave of legislation further repressing sexual and gender expression and access to information and advocacy are all the product of U.S. right-wing groups that have written and are shopping around their model bills. Um, the World Congress of Families was behind Ghana's bill, and we also know that, like, same with there are a number of different groups, and that all have work or operate the same playbook, but that they have been convening on the African continent with different governments, politicians in each of these different countries to promote these bills. So yeah, I don't know if you have. I think you know even more about some of um, these organizations, or maybe
Yeah,
sorry.
I mean, over the past, I would say 16, 17 years, different publications have come out of documenting different bodies, some of them bigger than others, Western groups, like evangelical groups, that have been shaping or trying to shape anti-LGBT legislation. They're considered like the anti-gender movement. Um, by some some LGBT movement activists. But these are folks who are like anti-gender rights activists, basically these evangelicals who are working with local bodies, actors, politicians, religious leaders, individual activists, to push um, these legislations, right? There is influence, Western influence, right? And a lot of money, as you quoted, like literally a lot of money. If nothing else, these politicians will do this for the money, right? Forget the human rights and the whatever else. We know they don't care about human rights
Yeah,
because
and I feel like those wasn't there a clip of like the lead sponsor of the bill a few years before they introduced the bill in 2021, kind of being very understanding of the need for queer rights to be protected in Ghana, and then he does the 180 and is the biggest champion of the bill.
right. So the hypocrisy, I mean, you just track these people dig a little deeper, and you'll just see um, that these people are hypocrites, opportunists. But whatever their reasoning, the impact is still what it is, right? Which is that it's harmful. So, Uganda, I'm sure folks followed their journey with their bill over the almost a decade and a half um, fight against this bill, and it's gone through different versions up until it passed most recently, right? Initially, it had a death penalty component as a punishment for certain violations, which drew a lot of like international criticisms. And the person, it was at that point, these evangelicals were less strategic, and so they were more openly advocating for these bills, and they were sued. And my theory is that they're being more careful now because they were sued, and they were lucky to win that lawsuit, but it was again based on like some technicality, right? But Scott Lively, who is an American pastor, who was in Uganda and influenced in the Ugandan bill, worked with local politicians, drafted it, got it passed, and eventually SMUG, the Sexual Minorities of Uganda, sued him in the United States. They were represented by, I think, the Center for Constitutional Rights in the United States. I believe that's who represented them. And that lawsuit was in 2017, and they ultimately, unfortunately, lost because of, you can read into the details, but some technicality.
About
This,
legal standing, like the reforing, and he was in the US and something
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
So not because he, he didn't win because he didn't play a role or didn't cause harm. It's because of that, right? Jurisdiction of the lawsuit, basically. But apparently, I had to look up quickly what he's up to. He still has basically another LGBT organization. He changed the name of his other organization. I don't know if he changed it or closed that organization, but now has another organization called Abiding Truth Ministries, which is an anti-LGBTQ group that's based in California. And apparently, this man is also trying to fundraise because he's broke from the lawsuit for him. These forces are in Africa. Some of them live there or lived there, and have a lot of money, right? They're funded by millionaires and billionaires with a lot of power. And their narrative is that they've lost the cultural wars in the United States or in the West, and Africa is like, the hope for humanity. Paraphrasing, but that's basically the framing for humanity against the deviancy and moral corruption or whatever the language they use of homosexuality and abortion and whatever other rights that marginalized genders and sexualities deserve and need, right? So some of them are like Ghana in this proposed bill is talking about same-sex marriage. Nobody's pushing for same-sex marriage right now, right? Or even like adoption by queer people, right? And yet they preemptively list in all the things. What is it informed by? What folks were able to win in the United States, not what people are actually, or in parts of Europe, not what Ghanaian LGBTQ people are pushing for right now, right? So it's like this preemptive, we're going to criminalize things. Don't even think about it, right? More signs that this is influenced by Western forces. Right now we have evidence, and there's, news articles, investigative pieces that are coming out, journal articles that are coming out documenting the different forces, but it's not all so definitive. And I think it's by design that they're more they have more of a shadow influence than this, like what the Scott Lively's of the past did, right? Which was like this arrogant, we're going to come in and we're going to give money and we're going to, flex our power, and oops, yeah, you can get sued. So anyway, I think that kind of partly answers your question, but yes, the Quote Conquerors of Families. We just recently heard there's a group of parliamentarians who are going to be coming, who have a recurring conference on the continent that is focused on, anti-LGBTQ advocacy, and they will be coming to Ghana this year,
Right.
with their conference. So there's definitely a coordinated movement, and there's money behind it. Those kind of things are not cheap, and so who's funding it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Who's funding it? There's investigative work that needs to be done there.